In a clash of the Carolinas where every second counts.
Mountaineers held East Tennessee State to just 3 of 13.
One quarterback, Cade Klubnik, ignites the field with a jaw-dropping 76-yard touchdown on the opening drive.
Klubnik zips it down the field. Wesco in stride, and the Tigers are on the board.
With 7 first-half touchdowns, Klubnik shatters records, and freshmen burst onto the scene.
Here's Klubnik, the keeper, and the Clemson touchdown. Touchdown, Clemson. Oh my, look what Brenningstool found. And another Tiger touchdown. Williams, touchdown. Wow, Klubnik, that's a keeper, and he's got his 4th touchdown of the night. TJ Moore scores. And another Tiger touchdown for Brenningstool.
Defensively, the Tigers are unstoppable, breaking up passes, racking up tackles for loss. In a record-breaking frenzy, Clemson crushes Appalachian State 66-20.
Nice boy, pulls it away, flips it to Watkins again. Watkins breaks a tackle, great breakout speed in a foot race. Watkins goes, touchdown! Oh my!
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 3 of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. As always, I'm Drew Archer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Johnson. How's it going, Matthew?
How's it going, everybody? And how's it going, Drew? Ready for talk some football? We had a great game that I don't think either of us were really expecting.
Yeah. I did make the guarantee at the end of last week's episode that Clemson would cover the spread, but I did not envision it going quite the way that it did.
You didn't think we would double the spread in the first quarter?
No. If you told me that Cade Klubnik would not finish the game, I would have told you it was far more likely he played terribly or got injured, and that was the reason he didn't play at all in the second half. But it was for much more positive reasons.
Yeah, I was actually going to throw out a prediction last week that we would see Chris Vezina, but I wasn't aware that he was the second-string quarterback. I thought he might still be third on the depth chart. And I was going to leave that up for interpretation of whether you thought it was going to be a good or a bad thing for Cade, of whether we see Vezina.
Well, there was a lot of good in Saturday's performance against Appalachian State. Not a whole lot to nitpick, but college football, the National Football League, it's all back. I had 2 full days of football to watch. We celebrated my dad's birthday Sunday, so I didn't get a full day Sunday, but I did get to see my Cowboys whoop up on Deshaun Watson and the Browns. Looking at some of the games here this weekend, I'm going to run through them. Matthew, feel free to stop me as you wish. The Texas-Michigan game, Texas blew out Michigan 31-12. We talked a lot about Notre Dame the last couple weeks. They fall at home to unranked Northern Illinois.
Yeah, Northern Illinois had no business winning this game. And if you follow the show, you'll know I threw out Northern Illinois as my underdog pick last week. I don't know how good Notre Dame is. I think they were just riding in this game on preseason hype, and that's why the line was so bad. But hopefully you were following my picks last week.
I believe I'm right in saying this is the third time under Marcus Freeman that Notre Dame has lost a game that they were a double-digit favorite against. And I just had one of the teams in the previous few seasons on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember. But this is the third time that's happened. Marcus Freeman has done a good job of winning the games, the big games, whereas a lot of times when Brian Kelly was there, they wouldn't win those big games. Brian Kelly at least won the games he was supposed to, and they dropped this one to Northern Illinois. Didn't get a chance to watch most of these games, but a score that kind of jumped out to me, Boise State, Oregon. Oregon wins out by just 3 points at home. The Duke's Mayo Classic in Charlotte, that was not a game for long. Tennessee beats NC State 51-10.
Yeah, I was so I didn't get to watch any early window games because me and my girlfriend took a trip out to Rocky Mountain National Park, did some hiking and sightseeing. So I did it. That's why I didn't get to see the Texas-Michigan game. But once I got home, I was flipping back and forth and trying to keep up with this Tennessee-NC State game. But much like the Wolfpack defense, I lost interest pretty early.
Yeah, that was not even close. My boss, he's just a fan of North Carolina teams. He himself went to App State. His son graduated from NC State. His daughter graduated from North Carolina, so he roots for all three. His son's a football coach at a high school in North Carolina. Their JV team got killed. Their varsity team got upset. He drove to Charlotte for the NC State-Tennessee game. They got beat. So it was just all around bad weekend for him. NC State, too, is Clemson's next opponent coming out of this bye week as well. Oklahoma struggling on the road at Houston. And then the game that we actually had on at the tailgate over the Texas-Michigan game, just because that game was not really close, was the Georgia Tech-Syracuse game. Syracuse upsets Georgia Tech at home 31-28.
Yeah, I think Kyle McCord is looking really good, and the ACC is looking very competitive this year. Obviously, if Clemson keeps playing like they did on Saturday, it might not be that competitive, but as of right now, it looks like all the teams are going to be pretty even.
Yeah, now I don't think the ACC is very top-heavy. I still think Miami is the best team in the league. Clemson a close second, but there's a lot of parity amongst the middle of the pack teams, I believe, this year in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, you got both of those teams, Georgia Tech and Syracuse, and then even like Pitt looked pretty good already this year.
Boston College is ranked this week.
Exactly. Like there's that like upper middle tier of ACC play is going to be a tight one.
Yeah. Speaking of tight ones, you don't want a tight one in your plumbing system or your septic tank. If you do, give them a call. Alan Powell and the folks at Pump Monkey Septic Service would be glad to come out and give you a free estimate. Alan Powell is a Clemson alumni. He still lives in the Clemson community and services the upstate of South Carolina. You can reach Pump Monkey Septic Service at 864-710-2211. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram. I always joke with Alan Powell. Septic services are not necessarily the types of accounts I want to follow on Instagram. Those pictures don't necessarily intrigue me, but if that does interest you, give them a follow on Instagram. But again, that phone number is 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey. Let's review this App State game. I threw out that bold prediction at the end. Maybe it wasn't that bold because I wasn't committed enough to pick it in our pick'em contest, but I felt pretty confident that Clemson would have a better showing. Despite all of the mistakes, I liked what I saw in the Georgia game partially with the offense. But Clemson improved to 35-9 in games following a loss under Dabo Swinney. This includes season openers following a loss in the previous season finale. Clemson is now 15-2, directly preceding regular season open date since 2012. This next fact is going to lead into a trivia question here for you, Matthew. Dabo Swinney, who had 170 wins prior to the game, moved to 171. He matches career win totals with college football Hall of Famers Wallace Wade and Mark Richt. Mark Richt gave the invocation 2 weeks ago against the Georgia game. But here's a trivia question for you, Matthew. I don't know how up and up you are with Wallace Wade stats.
I was going to ask you who he coached.
Alabama and Duke, as what Duke Stadium's named after.
Okay. I knew that it was familiar, and that's where I know it from, is Duke Stadium.
He coached football, basketball, and baseball. Trivia question here. How many points did Wallace Wade's 1938 team allow the entire season?
I'm going to go, I'm just going to say 0. They didn't allow a single point all year.
Very close. 7.
Okay.
Duke outscored opponents 117-7.
Wow.
That year. The lone touchdown was given up in the final minute of the Rose Bowl, and ultimately Duke fell to USC 7-3.
Wow. So they didn't give up a point all year until the last minute of the bowl game.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I guess, was that for a national championship?
It wasn't the national championship game. I believe TCU won the championship that year. Had they won that game, I don't know, because I forget how they handled all the national championships.
Yeah, I feel like it might
then.
have been like post bowl season where like voters determined it, and like going into the game, it wasn't necessarily like known as the national championship. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, but what a terrible way to end the season. Potentially have a national championship on the line. Hadn't given up a single touchdown all season long. And 1 minute away. Back to Clemson. Clemson reached 700 yards of total offense for the 7th time in team history and for the first time since 702-yard performance against Wofford in 2019. Clemson's 56 first-half points were the program's most on record, surpassing its modern record of 52 set against Georgia Tech in 2020. Quarterback Cade Klubnik only played the first half, but finished the contest having completed 24 of 26 passes for a career high of 378 yards and 5 passing touchdowns, in addition to his 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, at the end of last week's episode, after you gave out the prediction of covering the spread, I kind of got on board, but if you remember, I kind of was surprised at this passing frequency because I expected us to go in and have a heavy dose of Phil Maffa and even find out who our running back 2 is going to be, who's going to take that role. But I also understand like wanting to try and get your passing game in rhythm against a group of 5. I just didn't think that was going to work out, and we'd end up relying on old reliable and number 7 there.
Couldn't ask for a better performance. So it was 24 of 26. The 2 incompletions were not drops, were not bad throws. They were thrown away. So just threw them out of bounds.
That's actually really impressive then. Good decision-making all around by Cade this game, really. And he just looked like he was on a different level than the other team.
Absolutely. He finished with a pass efficiency of 277.9, breaking Taj Boyd's school record for a single game with a minimum of 20 snaps. Taj's record previously was 261.9 versus Syracuse in 2013. Bryant Wesco Jr. caught 3 passes for 130 yards with a touchdown.
Yeah, and Wesco should have had 2 touchdowns, but he got that one over his shoulder and got tripped up from behind, but tackled on like the 3 or 4 yard line. So that was a great ball and great catch, but I feel like that one deserves a touchdown too. So very close to 2 touchdowns on his first 2 receptions. Or no, I think we threw like a little screen out to him and then had that second deep ball. So, almost going 2 long touchdowns on your first 3 catches is impressive. I hope Bryant Wesco is here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Pay up that NIL money, Davo. Then just an impactful 3 catches. Tight end Jake Brenningstool caught 7 passes for 100 yards with 2 touchdowns. You mentioned Phil Maffa. He rushed 10 times for 118 yards with a touchdown. Unofficially, 105 players played for Clemson in this contest. It tied the 3rd most players played in a game under Dabo Swinney, and the 5th time Clemson played 100 players. It felt good to get back to that. I will just admit I was tired. I was traveling all weekend. I drove from Myrtle Beach that morning. We left at halftime, so I didn't see any of that. I listened to it on the radio back home, but it is nice to see Clemson be able to get up with the lead, pull the starters, and let those younger guys play, because I feel like that was a big part of our success during those championship runs, where by the time you got to the end of the season, all of these players had tons of experience.
Yeah, and I think that contributed to Clemson's detriment over the past couple years, where you've been in a lot more close games, not really getting those reserves in on even in conference games, we weren't getting reserves in. So then you get to the end of the season, you have injuries, and those players are playing for the first time. So I really hope we can get back to this, like really handling the opponents that we're supposed to handle. And that way that helps Dabo's philosophy a lot more about not using the transfer portal. And if we can keep doing that, then I'm never going to complain about not taking a transfer.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are some of the stats. Matthew and I are going to give our thoughts out here just before I let Matthew throw out his thoughts, just a general just game day vibe, thoughts being back at Death Valley. It was awesome. Now I know App State has some success. They're not just some pushover like playing South Carolina State, Citadel, that kind of thing. It was packed. Like, I know you're familiar with where we sit, Matthew. The student section in that top corner is usually always empty. It was filled to the corner, and the entire back walkway was slammed full of just students and people standing. It felt like the crowd was there for like a big time game. Beautiful sunset right as the game started.
Oh yeah, I saw a lot of pictures of that on Twitter, and even they mentioned it and showed it on the broadcast of how great of a sunset it was.
You couldn't ask for a better day. It got cool as the sun went down. It was super comfortable, nice little breeze. There were a couple raindrops, but overall good time. Concession stands still terrible, but I will say they did update the hot dog buns. I think it might be like a potato bun. It was a little bigger. It was a nice little touch there. Prior to the game, they did a nice tribute to DeAndre Overton. Sad to hear about the passing. That one kind of just hit me hard. He's like 26 years old, wrong place, wrong time. Seemed like such a good dude, always full energy, that kind of stuff. And Dabo has the two guys on the team. I feel like I'm terrible with our roster. I don't know who our 214s are.
Danny Pierman's son is one of them.
That's
and then,
right.
I think it was a DB is the other guy. But yeah, I saw that. For anybody who didn't watch the game, they did show this on the broadcast of they were kind of hyping up the hill rundown, and as Clemson approached, you see the 214s like come to the hill, and I don't know if the broadcast team like got all the information about what was going on pregame and like how they were honoring DeAndre Overton. So they didn't really mention it, but it was really cool to see how they let the cannon go off, and the rest of the team did not run down the hill until the two number 14s were all the way at the bottom. So, like you said, that's so tragic to hear. I mean, he's pretty much my age, and I just remember him as being a great team player because he was here for 4 or 5 years. Didn't always get the most playing time, but when he did, he was in there. And he was like a real leader on the team. So very sad news about that. But I really appreciate how Clemson handled that situation.
Yeah. And on some lighter news and a little bit more of an update to inside joke for Matthew and I did discover Pink and her husband are in the same tailgating lot as us this weekend.
Oh.
So
Hopefully that was just a one game thing and they didn't get a season pass.
Yeah. I went to the porta potty at one point during the day, and I look over and they're right beside the porta potty. I'm like, I'm running into these people everywhere. But
I swear I saw them like just in town in Clemson before, like walking through downtown while I was coming home from class or something.
Yeah. For your listeners that have no idea what we're talking about, I may have gotten a little bit of a confrontation with someone the first game of the season last year. And his wife has a hairstyle like Pink. So, there's that. As far as the actual game goes, kind of piggybacking off of what I said about Cade last week, one of the guys in the press box in between series broke out his binoculars and just sat there and watched Cade through the entire time before the offense took the field again. And he seemed confident. He was watching film. He was talking to his receivers, that kind of stuff. That carried over, and Cade had no jitters, was on time, putting balls in places where only his receivers can get to it. He looked confident. So I was very pleased to see that. He was named the co-ACC quarterback of the week.
Who else? Who else did they give it to?
Syracuse's quarterback.
Oh, Kyle McCord. Okay. That makes sense because they had a big upset win. I was going to say, like, who had a better game than throwing or scoring 7 touchdowns in a half?
I still think Cade had the better week, but I think they are giving it to him for the upset. And then my only other thing of note is nothing really to nitpick or say on the defense, but future is bright in Clemson, South Carolina with Wesco and Moore. As long as they can continue with their connection there with Cade Klubnik, I like Clemson's odds the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be important to keep Wesco in the lineup and running with the ones to keep that chemistry going. But I just hope as the competition level starts to step up that we can keep that same confidence and keep it rolling. But getting on to my thoughts of the game, wow, is all I had to say about the first half. I mean, I was sitting there watching it with my girlfriend, and we were flabbergasted that we were throwing balls down the field consistently. Not only were we doing it, but they were accurate, and the receivers were there with space. It was just something we have not seen. Like, it almost seemed like a completely different team, or like we were playing a team like Wofford or South Carolina State or some other school like that. So obviously the competition from week 1 to week 2 vary very greatly. But so did our offensive production. I do want to say, though, like, especially that first deep ball to Bryant Wesco, I think once we get up to higher competition, that throw is not going to be there with a like higher level safety play. Because if the deep safety in the middle of the field was a little bit faster, he might pick that ball off or at least cause an incompletion. Maybe Cade can put a little more zip on that, and he didn't because he didn't have to. Only time will tell. But
there were a couple of throws that he made that I had the same thought, that you play Miami, Florida State, some of these teams that have some 4 and 5 star guys back there in the backfield, that they're definitely not going to necessarily complete those passes, but it did work against App State.
Yeah, and I like putting those on film so that way those other teams have to respect them. And they're going to have, like, it's not just going to be load the box and you can stop Clemson and get in a close game. It's going to be, you're going to have to cover the whole field or we're going to make you pay. And I really appreciate that about this game. But other than that, I'm just really in shock. Don't have that much to say because, 56 points and a half, 35 in the first quarter, almost 42 in the first quarter. And I think we scored 42 with like 13 and a half minutes. It was 42-0 left in the second quarter. That's, I don't know. That's nothing I thought I would see this season from Clemson football.
No. And to your point, there's obviously a big difference in the level of competition they played in week 1 versus week 2. And that's what a lot of naysayers and people from the outside, fans of other teams, have pointed out. It was just App State. App State is a solid program. They're better than these other teams that Clemson has done stuff like this to before. Wofford 5 years ago. And even against those teams, with Clemson having more elite talent, still did not put up the numbers they did on those teams back then. So whether it was against App State or not, it was still very impressive.
Yeah, and like we already mentioned, but being able to get the reserves in and get them valuable experience against a good program like App State especially. And I think that's going to be really good for us in the future, not even just this season, but in the seasons to come.
Absolutely.
Twitter polls.
All right, Twitter poll of the week. As always, follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you prefer, at Nachos_analysis, where each week we will post a poll that we will discuss on that week's episode. This week's poll is, what were you most encouraged by in Clemson's 66-20 win over App State? The options were quarterback play, freshman wide receivers, play calling, and other. Before Matthew and I give our thoughts, again, shout out to all the listeners who reply and get their comments in each week. For the second consecutive week, Gerald Johnson, your father, is the first one to get a comment in. He said, while all of the above could be the answer, I went with quarterback after 3 years of terrible quarterback play. It was great seeing that on display. So Cade gets the nod. El Cid, or as the folks in the Cajun Cafe refer to him, Mud, gets in and says, I was most discouraged by the screaming third down guy. It was awful.
I was not there, so I don't know what this means.
It's good that it didn't get picked up on the TV. You know how in South Carolina before third down they have just some raging lunatic come over and scream over the PA system, "It's third down."
Clemson did that?
Clemson did that.
Oh, no.
But it will not happen again because there was a thread on Tiger Illustrated. Enough people have already complained that they said that it will never happen again. So
I don't think we need it because every third down, the band does that little cue.
yeah.
I don't think, like, that's what that is for Clemson. We don't need a guy yelling.
No.
We can interpret the music.
Yeah. If you've been going to Clemson games for any amount of time, you know when you hear that da-da-da-da song that it's about time, which later in life I learned that was actually, you know where Clemson band got that song from?
No, what is it?
That is the Elmo song. I was humming that at work one day and somebody was like, "Why are you humming the Elmo song?" And I was like, "I'm not humming the Elmo song. That's something that Clemson band plays." And I played it for them, and they were like, "Yeah, that's the Elmo song." And I went and looked it up, and it definitely is.
That's hilarious. So that should have been the trivia question this week.
Yeah. So not quite as intimidating when you find out or peel the layers back on that one. Peter Marvin gets in and said, "I hit other because I believe all of the above. Cade looked like what we expected him to look like when he came in. The playbook was wide open, and so were the receivers. Wesco is him, and so is Moore. If we get half of this against NC State, I'm confident we're in Charlotte." And then Oliver McClendon says quarterback play 100%. How did you vote in this poll again? What were you most encouraged by in Clemson's 66-22 win over App State, Matthew?
I'm going with all of our responders here and going quarterback play. And not, like we talked about, we're kind of Cade fans here. I think we give him more benefit of the doubt than other Clemson fans. But I think the reason why we've been so hard, or Clemson fans as a whole have been so hard on Cade as starter, is we all knew he was capable of this. And this might be the first time we've ever seen it for like at least a whole half at one time. So that's the only reason I give it to him. I think that's very encouraging just to see Cade finally put it all together and have a dominant performance. And I'm not like changing my expectations necessarily for his season based off of this App State game, but it is encouraging to see. I did want to shout out the honorable mention to the freshman wide receivers, Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. Bryant Wesco, crazy getting over the top, might just be like an elite deep threat, which is something Clemson's been missing since Martavis Bryant, Mike Williams, maybe T. Higgins was that role. But I feel like T. Higgins was almost more of a possession physical type guy while he was here. So it's been a long, long time since we've had a deep threat like that. Hopefully that connection can stay up.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you too. I'm going to go with quarterback play. I'm going to echo your thoughts that despite all the hate that Cade has gotten, if you just look at it objectively, especially in that game against Georgia, he didn't play terrible. There was a lot of bright spots in there. Dabo said in his post-game press conference after the Georgia game that he was encouraged by how the team was already responding. Cade got up, stood in front of the team, and took ownership and rallied the team. And you could easily see a quarterback after a blowout loss like that, your offense didn't score a touchdown, come out and struggle. It could affect you mentally. And they came out firing on all cylinders. Cade racked up stats that you would see out of a player for an entire game in 30 minutes. So very encouraged by Cade's performance there. The way that the poll shook out kind of goes along the lines of our comments and what Matthew and I said. But other got 2% of the vote. Play calling, which I have a quote here. Dabo was asked about Garrett Riley and his coaching performance this week. Let's see where they go. He said, he got everybody involved early and we just got into a rhythm. It makes it easier to dial things up when this team gets into a rhythm. that was a big part of last season, I feel like, too. Incomplete passes, mistakes. It's hard to get into a rhythm, which then affects the play calling. But play calling getting 21% of the votes, freshman wide receivers 31% of the vote, and then quarterback play winning this poll 46% of the vote. So thank you again for everybody who participates each week in our Twitter poll at nachos_analysis. Follow us on Twitter. We like to amuse ourselves, throw out some funny stuff, some serious stuff, some stats, all of the above. So give us a follow if you do not already.
Fact or fiction?
All right, fact or fiction. Clemson's offense is more like what we saw against App State than week 1 versus Georgia.
This is a very interesting one that I had to think about. So good job, Drew, for writing this question. I said fact. I think playing against Georgia is an outlier. And while we're obviously not going to get 7 first-half touchdowns every game for the rest of the season from Cade, we're going to be closer to that than not scoring a touchdown at all. Which I just thought about, actually. I saw right before this App State game on Twitter that Cade had not thrown a touchdown pass since North Carolina last season, which was right before the South Carolina game. No touchdown passes in the South Carolina game, no touchdown passes in the bowl game, and then no touchdown passes against Georgia. He made up for it in this one.
I'd say so. I'm going to say fact as well. Now, Clemson's offense isn't going to be hitting on all cylinders quite like that next week against NC State, but they're going to look more like that offense than the offense we saw against Georgia. Georgia's elite on defense. They have speed and talent that Clemson's likely not to see for the rest of the season unless they make the college football playoff. So don't expect Cade Klubnik to get pulled at half every week this season, but I do believe that this is a closer idea of what Clemson's offense is. Fact or fiction, a week 3 bye is too early and will affect Clemson's offensive momentum.
Okay, I didn't know how to answer this one. I said fact, but I hope that this bye week is just a week to get some injured guys back, keep your chemistry going in practice, maybe even add a couple sprinkles in, like different variations of plays that you've already put on film into practice for NC State. But NC State's defense looked bad against Tennessee, so I'm not that worried about it as of right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you too. I think this is just scarred me talking from Christmas teams or Clemson teams of past.
Teams of Christmas past.
Yeah. And I meant to go back in and look up the stat, Clemson's record after a bye week. It's obviously a good record going into it. I threw that stat out earlier. I think they generally do pretty well. But after week 1 and how that result happened, then you turn around and have a completely opposite result against App State. You got all this momentum, and then you just got a bye week. I agree that could be good for the health of the team, that kind of thing. Clemson is the beneficiary of 2 bye weeks this year. But I don't know. I could see it affecting momentum. If the team we saw on Saturday night in Clemson and the Duke's Mayo Classic show up in 2 weeks, I think Clemson wins easily, but that is still 2 weeks away.
Yeah. And I hope that maybe just this week during the bye, we get some one-on-one action, like first team defense versus first team offense, just to keep you sharp, because, you might lower your speed a little bit, get a little complacent running against the, scout team for a whole week and not playing a game. So that's why I said fact, but I'm not expecting it to be like a huge drop off. I think Clemson staff is going to be good at carrying the momentum.
Yeah. And then with this last fact or fiction, I do have a little bit of a disclaimer. This is not an original thought. I did hear this one on Pardon My Take on Monday's episode as they were breaking down the Cowboys-Browns game. But fact or fiction, Deshaun Watson is a better human being than a football player at this point in his career.
This is so bad. I said fact, but it's close. And the only reason I say that is because I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. I got on Twitter and saw a new allegation from a 2020 sexual assault released yesterday or the day before. So Sunday or Monday for those listening as the episode released. The details that I read in that story, and I'm going to censor myself here for YouTube because they'll like automatically flag us for saying certain words. The details of the story sound a lot more like grape than essay, which is what the headlines said it was. It's so disappointing. I don't know if people on the podcast really know, but Deshaun is just 1 year older than me, grew up 20 minutes away at my rival school, and it was always like a huge thing of what he was going to do for our community, being a high rated recruit, winning national championship at Clemson. It's just so disappointing for me as a Hall County native.
Well, sorry to bring the mood down, but no, I agree with you too. I'm making lighthearted of a situation because he did look terrible the other day, and I was talking with someone about the other day. I think Deshaun Watson's best football might be behind him, and you think about all the legal trouble that he's been in, and then a couple injuries has put him out. He's played very little football over the last 2 or 3 seasons, and that was on display this past weekend. So not a good football player and seemingly not a good person.
Probably the best thing he's done in his NFL career is absolutely robbing the Cleveland Browns of $240 million.
Yeah. They were talking on Part of My Take about it this morning, about how it was the worst, could be one of the worst contracts ever in human history. Someone threw out the contract that whatever the company that owned the Titanic might be a little worse.
I don't know. This one, inflation-wise, I think Deshaun's contract is probably pushing. If with adjusted for inflation, Deshaun's contract is still more.
Yeah. As bad as the contract is not bad for Deshaun Watson. So regardless of if he plays another snap well or if he stinks it up, still good for him. So that wraps up our serious fact or fiction today.
Weekly picks.
All right, let's review our week 2 pick'em contest. One of us had a really good week, and one of us is named Drew. Congrats, Matthew. Matthew went 3-1 last week. I went 1-3. So we both dropped our favorite, and then you got every other pick right.
Yeah, my favorite was close too. It was 20-19 was the final score. I picked Iowa. That was favored by 3. Iowa started that game up 17-0. I thought I was going perfect this weekend off of that, but then Iowa State made it a really good game in the second half. We've already talked about this game on this episode, but the Northern Illinois Notre Dame game, not even in the slightest when I wrote this pick down did I think that Northern Illinois was going to win this game. I was just thinking that 29.5 was way too much for Notre Dame, who hadn't proved anything, with a new quarterback also on top of that. But it's a really great win for that Northern Illinois program. And I don't know if you saw that post-game interview with their coach, Drew, but he was getting emotional. That's really big for their program, and happy to see it for them. I also hit on my over, which was Duke Northwestern. That was a Friday night game. Let me see. The final score was 26-20. Over-under was 39.5. That over would not have hit if that game ended in regulation. It went into double overtime and then hit 26-20. So shout out to Duke and Northwestern for covering me there. And then lastly, under Georgia Tech Syracuse, another game we've already talked about. But this one, Vegas lines are very scary. And paying attention to these really helps me buy into those, all sports are scripted, type of, it's a conspiracy type thing, because the line for this game was 59.5. Final score 28-31, total of 59. I picked under and got that pick, so let's go.
I did not have that same luck this week. You went Georgia Tech, Syracuse under. I went Georgia Tech favored by 3 on the road at Syracuse. Syracuse upsets Georgia Tech, wins by 3 there. The only pick I did get right was my underdog, Michigan State, plus 9.5 points against Maryland. Baylor, Utah took for the over. That only got to 45. The over for that game was 53.5. And then the Iowa State game, I took the under. Like you mentioned, Iowa started that game off winning 17-0. That was the last score I saw before I saw the final score, and was kind of dumbfounded with that result there. So not a good week for me. The season standings, Matthew leads with 6 points. I follow in 4 points. Matthew, do you have any punishment ideas?
Yeah, I sent you this on Twitter this week. I actually have to give another shout out to my girlfriend Rachel, because she sent me this. It's a tweet about a fantasy football punishment that's similar to the Waffle House Challenge, which I know we've flirted with as a possibility of a punishment. But this one is a bar challenge where you find a bar that's open for as many hours as possible, I guess. And then it's basically the Waffle House Challenge, but every drink gets you 30 minutes off of your time that you can leave. So that's my idea for now. I don't know how much my body would agree with that. So I just hope I keep the momentum rolling. Did you have a punishment idea?
Well, I had one that's probably not realistic for us, but I referenced part of my take. I was listening to the latter part of their episode today, and they're trying to figure out what their punishment would be for their season-long NFL Pick'em contest. And one idea that they're kind of leaning towards is, and they always do, the loser obviously does a punishment. There's 4 of them. But the person who finishes in second place also gets punished because they were first loser. So they propose that the loser who finishes in 4th place has to go to 4 weddings in 4 weekends of listeners of the show that they don't know. And that the second place team has to go to a funeral of a family member of a listener of the show. Which that just sounds like great content and very awkward.
Too bad most of our listeners were related to.
So if any of your family members die around the time we get to the end of our contest and you want us to show up at their funeral, just let us know.
But with all of that being said, we can move on to week 3 picks, and I'll go ahead and start off. My favorite this week, going Maryland, 2.5 point favorite versus Virginia. Let me double check if this game is at home. Okay, it is away for Maryland, and Maryland's favored by 3, but Maryland had a pretty good fight against Michigan State last week, and I still don't know what Tony Elliott's Virginia team is made of, so I like Maryland there.
For my favorite pick here, I'm going out on a limb because I'm choosing probably the largest point disparity in a spread that I ever have in this contest. I'm going Kent State at Tennessee minus 49 in favor of Tennessee. What Tennessee did to NC State, I think they're going to put it on Kent State. So 49-point spread. Here we go. I'm taking a gamble.
I don't know if that's a bad one, especially after how last week went. You might as well just go for it. Okay, underdog. I'm going to be an ACC homer this week and go Boston College +7 versus Missouri. I believe this game is at Missouri also. So I like what I've seen out of Boston College this year so far. It is at Missouri, just to let you know. 17 point. Oh, wait, I put that number wrong. Boston College is a 17-point underdog, not a 7-point underdog. I'm expecting Boston College to cover that. I like them this year.
It's funny you say that because I too like that as well, and you got a better price on it, so I'm going to go with your number. I too am going Boston College as the underdog, so I'm going to take your 17 points as well. So this will be a just flat out wash for the two of us this week.
Well, I actually might prefer to do the 16.5 because I was very hesitant picking the 17 just because it's a whole number, and I've gotten really screwed on some whole numbers in the past of this pick'em contest.
We can just take whichever benefits each of us.
Okay, I like that. So moving on to over, I did this last week where I picked, and I found out later it was the Battle of the Hawkeye State. I don't know what Oregon State is, but I'm going with the over for Oregon versus Oregon State. Usually this is a end of the year matchup, but with conference realignment, we're getting it in week 3. That plus or minus was 50.5.
I like that one. I looked at that one too. For my under, I am going to the Big Ten as well. Arkansas State at Michigan, over under 45.5. Think we might have a low scoring affair here. Michigan hadn't put up a ton of points this season yet.
This should be a good tune-up game for them, though, with Arkansas State, but that's not a program that you should overlook. And lastly, my under, New Mexico at Auburn. That is a 61.5 point line right now. I'm expecting most of those points to come from Auburn, but after last week losing to Cal, you never know. So I don't know that Auburn's offense has 61 in them by themselves.
Yeah, Auburn drops to ACC foe Cal last week. I am sticking in the SEC as well with my under pick and the site of college football game day this week, LSU at South Carolina. I'm taking that under 50.5 points there. So no Clemson football this week, so we just get to sit back, relax, and watch football ourselves. Again, this is a bye week for the Tigers. Their next game is at home against NC State, September 21st. That was announced earlier this week. That'll be the noon ACC game or ABC game. The Tigers have a chance to become just the 14th FBS program to reach 800 all-time wins in this matchup with NC State. So big accomplishment on the line. But as always, thank you for joining Matthew and I. Look forward to joining you next week when we actually have a Clemson game to preview. But enjoy the week off, enjoy the college football and NFL slate, and we'll see you here next week where we'll talk some ball. Peace.